Yes, people, right here, live and direct, right now on the Big Bad Station. We're going to be joined by Richard Rowe, so make sure you keep it locked in right here, right now. Big shout out to everybody who's been sending lots of love, lots of blessings. It's always appreciated. So, of course, without further ado, we're going to welcome our very special guest. Richard Rowe, you there?
I certainly am.
Great. So, of course, let the listeners know, let the people know who you are once again and a little bit about yourself.
Okay, right. Well, I'm an English local guy, married locally. In Coventry for 50 years. I'm now retired, and all my relatives are white English, and I've lived in this country all my life. So I'm if you like, a typical local person. I've worked in industry, was an accountant, retired now, and I've then been recently, in the last 7 years or so, I've been doing some local charities, the main one being Coventry Refugee and Migrant Centre. And although I was a mature, moderately educated person, I found actually I was extremely ignorant about the lives that other people lead, which is very different from mine. And I felt quite inadequate in terms of responding to their needs because I didn't necessarily understand. I learnt a lot from the people that I've met, which has been really good. And I'm writing a story, and it's about people's beliefs. And initially, it was generated by the Coventry Belgrade Theatre, who wanted stories from migrants. They said, would I take part because I knew the guys? And it didn't really work. So ridiculously, for the first time in my life, I decided to write a story myself. The problem was I didn't know very much, so it's very difficult for me to write about people's lives that you don't understand. So I've learned a lot. They've educated me a lot. I think differently, and the book is almost finished. It's called Prisoners of Beliefs, and basically it says that the beliefs that you hold determine to a large extent the way you interpret the world, and that the same event will be interpreted very differently by people with different beliefs. The hero is a black African. He escapes from a war zone. He crosses the Sahara Desert, which is a horrendous experience. I've actually met people who've crossed the Sahara Desert and read that part of my story, and they said, yes, that is what it's like. It is awful. He got an inflatable to cross the Mediterranean. He was put into a camp in Italy. He travelled across Europe, and he ends up in England, where he applies for right to remain. So I've got 3 short scenes. There are lots of characters in there, but I'm going to focus on the hero, who is the African guy called Carl. Highly intelligent, and he understands. He learns a lot about why his circumstances are as they are. This is a very heavy, and some people will say this is very depressing. What it's meant to be is honest. And that's only part of the story. In the end, he gets a job. He's a white English self-made multimillionaire, and educates the Englishman on how unfair the system is, and that it is not equal for everybody. There are lots of aspects, many subjects. I cover democracy, capitalism, modern economic slavery, religion, colonisation, decolonisation, racial prejudice, political correctness, the environment, etc. And there's a lot of evidence in there, a lot of facts, and they're true for everybody, whoever you are. So it's not written from one side about another side. It's saying these are the facts, and they are true for all of us. And it's meant. The objective is to create a platform where people can discuss openly, disagree with each other, and it is okay to put your opinions. So the bit that I'm going to focus on now is 3 separate scenes with Carl, the African guy. He's just arrived in England, and he applies for right to remain. This is heavy. It's sad because his life is very, very down at the moment. So I make no apologies. But at the end, there's a small window which he doesn't think much of, but actually changes the rest of his life. So there are lots of situations in there. Anyway, I'll buckle on.
Okay.
The first scene is scene 11, and it's called Arriving in England.
Okay.
Carl is homeless, penniless, and friendless, a worn shadow of the man who had escaped nearly 2 years earlier. Immediately, he applies to the Home Office for asylum and is allocated a room in a shared house, crammed with other migrant hopefuls of various nationalities, all with unknown experiences, problems, and aspirations. Not knowing who to trust, the residents do not mix. Far from gravitating towards people from his own region, Carl feels especially wary in case he becomes a target of retribution. Completely alone, relying on the remnants of his inner strength, he only has his thoughts for company. Surveying the room, he wonders what freak of time travel had brought this cacophony of furniture to the same location. Like him, they had clearly suffered greatly from the journey. The wardrobe door singing in its own language every time its contents are displayed. The warped drawer jammed half open, refusing all other positions, however hard it is rattled, and the bed in too much pain to support a human, complaining to everyone who tries to join it. Its only wish is to be left alone. The absence of a chair correctly assumes that friends are unobtainable in such an environment. The realization slowly dawns that these four walls are not for his protection, but to protect society from him. He has the keys to his own prison, but no invitation to visit other people's. Occasional outbursts from residents disturb long periods of oppressive silence, creating a tension that discourages conversation. Sweet, pungent smells in communal areas suggest private, non-tax-paying pleasures are normal. This is a place to survive in the hope of finding other normals, but there are no timescales. Too long in this environment and the resident will become like the bed, shunning company and opportunity. In Africa, he knew he was poor, but had never felt impoverished until he came to England. Back home, there were always friends, family, fresh food, and space to move around. This new environment would take some getting used to. Carl had always believed that all life is precious and unique, but fragile. Right now, he feels of no value to himself or anybody else. Haunted by memories and plagued by loneliness, there is no comfort or escape. Obsessing on the pointlessness of all human endeavour, Carl muses that in the end all effort comes to nothing. The only tragedy is if it does so in your own lifetime. Meandering thoughts keep returning to his dead friend. Has he found peace at last? And what of his own fate? Is his destiny to be condemned to perpetual torment, with all comfort denied until released by death? For a young man, this is a sentence his spirit could not bear. Flailing desperately for hope, he explores the thought of he is in England. There must be opportunities, but even they would not extinguish the reliving of past pains, or the knowledge of the continued suffering of those dearest to him. He is already saved compared with those that had created the world that he has deserted. Creeping nightfall slowly hides the room in a curtain of darkness, but fails to conceal these realities or the blackness of his thoughts. Even his own shadow has deserted him. Switching the light on would change nothing, yet he is safe and has choices. The lone candle of hope must not be extinguished. However remote, he might be their only possible rescue. If he is saved and gives up, how can he expect more from those he has left behind? Time will not diminish this reality. Focusing intently on the light bulb, he slowly rises from his bed, crosses the room, and switches the light on. The one thing he does have in abundance is time. Time to think, and he has a lot of thinking to do. So that's the end of that scene.
Wow, definitely set the scene with that. I'm pretty sure of it.
Yes, I know people who are in like bedsit land,
Yeah.
and they feel extremely isolated. I mean, there's a lot of British are like that. Students are like that. Old people are like that. But for migrants who've lost what they've known and are having to adjust to a completely different environment, it can be extremely tough.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm happy to talk about the issues, etc. At the end of the 3 scenes. But anyway, that's the first scene.
Okay.
The second scene is where he has a support worker called Graham. Graham's a white English guy and been doing support work for a long time. He's experienced and he tries to be jolly.
Okay.
This is not consistent with how Carl feels, and in the end, Carl explodes in anger.
Yeah.
And this is called Confinement is Not Freedom. Graham knocks on the door and waits to be invited in. Morning, Carl. How are you today? Fine. The effort of pretending to be okay is exhausting. Another fortnightly visit. I'll stand if that's okay. I don't want to vandalise your bed again. I have a few questions from the Home Office about your application to remain. Not again. What do these people want? My dead body to prove I'm in danger? Sensing the deep undercurrent of frustration, Graham offers explanation rather than comfort. They operate a safety-first policy, not yours, theirs. The political pressure to reduce the number of migrants entering the country is so great that they search for any reason to reject applicants, and the worse the war zone, the greater the fear of importing terrorists. Alarmed at the possible answer, Carl asks, how long might it take for them to make a decision? The answer is as unwelcome as feared. Don't hold your breath. I have clients who've waited years. Overwhelmed with despair, Carl is unable to hide the challenge to his sanity, and his sagging shoulders, he holds his head in his hands. Eventually he responds, okay, let's get on with it. Answering the letter takes about 30 minutes, followed by some lighter chit-chat. Seeing his client is very down, Graham looks for something positive to say. But at least you're in the UK and free. Graham's unthinking comment exposes his lack of understanding of the poverty of Carl's situation, detonating a deep well of frustration and anger as his client, losing control, stands and unloads. Whoa, 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 whoa! I am not free. I am in England and have protection from persecution and limited financial support from your government allows whilst my case is being reviewed. But I am stuck in this room for an indefinite period with the possibility of becoming free based on rules I hardly understand and seem to change like the wind. If my application is rejected, I may be deported back to the people who tried to kill me. In the meantime, I cannot move, get a job, form relationships, have independence, plan my future, or live a normal life. This, and he casts a contemptuous hand around the room, is not freedom. This level of frankness could be dangerous, but Graham interprets it as it is meant, a compliment that he is trusted enough to be told what his client really thinks. So that's the end of that scene.
Wow, it's getting more intense each time, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
It is. The next scene is possibly the heaviest.
Okay.
And the little bit of light seems nothing at the time, but sets the platform for what the rest of the book is about. And Carl is very bright, and he understands a lot, he learns a lot, and in the process he then knows much more about what's right and what's wrong, and he can then educate other people.
Okay.
And the person he educates the most is this self-made white English multimillionaire.
Yeah.
So anyway, right, the last scene is called Casual Comment Opens a Door to the Mind.
Okay.
The room is full of limitless time. Rest delivers the gift of physical recovery, but without human contact or occupation of mind and body, constant stress is a festering ulcer. Fixating on less and less, Carl is sufficiently self-aware that this is an assault on his sanity. The door is closed. Life fades away. The only company is the sound of wind blowing through the warped window. Isolation ferments a roaming imagination without restraint. He thinks and smiles and laughs at himself. But every laugh is a pretense, a denial, a gasp of air. Desperately trying not to drown, but there is no water, only in his mind, and a spade digging an ever deeper hole in his heart. A dark one, an empty one, a scary one. One that must remain buried. There is smoke. Through it, seeing what cannot be said. He wants to take a chance today. The key on the table will set him free. But if he escapes, where to go? There are no adventures. And once free, what will freedom mean? His scars alone will tell the tale, and show the world what could not be said. The door is closed, and here he stays, sinking and hoping to find a way, with nothing to hold on to, but listen to the wind blow through the warped window. A loud knock on the door jerks Carl back to his prison. Graham was due to visit, but time has lost meaning, and external events become unwelcome intrusions. Detecting the heavy mood of his client, Graham fumbles for anything to sound cheery. "I see you've put on a bit of weight. You look better for it." Starting a conversation is an effort not wholly welcome, but once underway, the burden eases. "My weight gain is because I don't walk anywhere. At home I walked everywhere, but here I have nowhere to go. I find the English food is not to my taste, and most African food seems to be Nigerian. At home we always ate with the family and friends. It's not the same eating on your own." Graham uses a time-honoured technique of asking about happier times. "What do you like to eat?" "Succotash, the way my mother used to cook it, but I haven't found it here." Unusually, today Graham is in a hurry and interrupts his client even at the risk of serving an unwelcome dish. "No news about your asylum application. It's still very early. The Home Office have to make inquiries through the British Embassy, and they're well practised in the art of losing paperwork. This inactivity is killing me. Every second is torture." "That's a good sign, because you expect better. Those who accept the present have given up. You're young and ambitious. You'll get through." The gaiety of Graham's optimistic words are confirmation that he does not understand how lost Carl is, and the conversation is now only with himself. In a despairing murmur, he completes the thought, "I hope so." Graham knows that if he allows Carl to wallow in his gloom, his client will be lost. "Well, look on the bright side. We will have a lot longer to get to know each other. Oh, by the way, as the Home Office assemble your file, they will call you for an interview, probably in Liverpool. It's vital that you attend, and whatever you do, don't be late." Listening without response, this may be reality, but it is not what Carl is desperate to hear. Changing the subject, Graham moves on. "You need to occupy your mind. Why don't you go to the library and pursue whatever interests you?" If this is a lifeline, it is a slender one with no immediate appeal. But in the absence of alternatives, Carl cannot think of an excuse to reject the suggestion. It's a thought, "I can't survive like this." And that's the end of that scene.
Wow. Yeah, it's getting intense each and every time.
So the idea is not to depress people, it's to say these are the realities for some people.
Yeah.
And they are some people in our society. And Carl, by going to the library, does a lot of research and he puts lots of things together. And he then forms a pattern which he then understands why his life is as it is. He says to Graham at one point, Graham says, "Well, why do you do all this studying?" Because he's at the library as long as the librarians are.
Yeah.
And he said, "To understand why my life is messed up." That's not the phrase he uses. It's a lot sharper than that.
Yeah.
And he said, "Don't tell me the sins of the past. I didn't have a past." So it's trying to sort of address baldly the reality for many people, and then start to analyse what are the factors that have brought our lives as they are today,
Yeah.
and what do we need to do now moving forward. And those are fundamental facts and fundamental challenges, and they apply to everybody, whoever you are. So if you take white British as a generalisation,
Yeah.
People who come to this country from other countries understand that they have to change and adapt to a new environment. Many of the British don't understand how much they need to adapt.
Yeah.
And they need to adapt enormously, not a little bit, massively. And psychologically, they're just not there. Give you an example. If you had if you had equality throughout the world, the standard of living in this country should be 40, maybe 50% lower than it is. So people are panicking because interest rates went up to 1%. That's a joke.
Yeah.
Interest rates should be much higher. And what we've done is pump money into property. So property prices are absolutely through the roof. They can only be justified by very low interest rates. And then rents for people, whether you're migrant, English or anybody else, all rents are ridiculously high.
Yeah.
Whereas on the other side, we don't pay nearly enough for clothes or food. And we are subsidised in this country. Whoever you are, if you're in this country, you are being subsidised. And you're being subsidised by the inequality and the economic slavery in many parts of the world. And whereas we're talking about, say, 60, 70 million people in this country, you go to Africa, Asia, South America, there are hundreds of millions who are actually subsidising the lifestyle that we enjoy in the West.
Yeah.
And that is a fundamental challenge. And in the process, we're destroying the planet. So these are big issues that it's difficult to argue against.
Yeah.
And in terms of religion, because there's quite a bit I've done on religion, I don't entertain at any point the argument that God exists or that God doesn't exist. You can't prove he exists, you can't prove he doesn't exist. It's a pointless argument that could go on forever. What I do is look at the religious organisations and how they behave in the world,
Yeah.
and how the stories they tell form opinions which then used to interpret other people who you never meet and you don't know.
Yeah.
And is one of the causes of the prejudice, the wars, and the suffering in many parts of the world over hundreds of years. You've only got to look at in Myanmar with the Rohingya. You've only got to look at the Palestinians in Israel. You can go to many, many different groups.
Yeah.
And we all have our beliefs, and we all interpret the world according to those beliefs. Some of those beliefs have some basis of fact. Some of them are just completely wrong.
Yeah.
And it's not to attack people's beliefs, it's to ask the question, to what extent do your beliefs support you in your life and those around you, or to what extent do they inhibit you, limit you, and cause problems for other people? And when you start asking questions in a factual base like that,
Yeah.
you find most religions are tied to a state. So the Queen is the head of the Protestant Church.
Yeah.
The Roman Catholics are in Rome, and they took over Christianity. It was from Africa, Egypt, and the Middle East, and none of them were white. And now it's completely dominated by Italians and by Europeans.
Yeah.
You look at Israel and the Jews; they're tied together. So the Palestinians have almost no legal rights. And when you start to look at the facts behind these things, there are many things wrong with the world, and they're not sustainable. And many of the white people, I'm generalising grossly, but many of the white people do not understand how much they need to change their behaviour if they're going to be successful going forward in the world. Because white people have always been a minority, always.
Yeah.
There were more people in China 1,000 years ago than in the whole of Europe. And if you look today, the white population is something like 16% of the world's population and reducing as a percentage every year.
Yeah.
And yet they control the economic system by which we all live. But the reality is, firstly, we're destroying the environment, and secondly, world economic and political power is shifting away from white people and over to the Far East.
Yeah.
And that is not something to be threatened by. It's a reality, should be accepted. It doesn't mean that you agree with everything that China does or whatever. It's got nothing to do with the morals, but it is the reality, and denying it is not dealing with the facts. So anyway, that's all of this is incorporated in Prisoners of Beliefs. I've gone through how Carl feels when he arrives in this country.
Yeah.
He has a difficult time. There are lots of there's racial prejudice, there's violence, there's sexual abuse and things like that in the story.
Yeah.
Not to spice it up, so that people are then like voyeuristically fascinated with it. Is to say this is actually happening in the world.
Yeah.
This is happening in Coventry, and it's happening in the UK, and it's happening in many parts of the world. And
Definitely.
those are the challenges that we have to face. And the Prisoners of Beliefs is trying to open up the questions and deliver a few facts so people can make up their own mind.
Yeah. Definitely. And just before you go, for the end of the interview, where can people go and get this book and find out more about it?
It will be on Amazon. It will be on a website. It will be in local charities. I'm trying to get it into bookshops as well, Waterstones and others like that. So it will be widely available. And also there will be, I hope, quite a lot of publicity, including people objecting to, what I've said. Absolutely fine. If people say, oh, that's rubbish or it's completely wrong or something, that's fine. But why do you say that?
Yeah.
And what you find is as soon as they make a criticism, they are calling on their beliefs.
Yeah.
And those are the things they need to examine. And that's when you can start to have the debate.
Definitely. I'm looking forward to hearing more and more debates. I want to say thank you to you again for coming on and talking to us about your book. I'm looking forward to actually getting a physical copy. So thank you once again.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for your time.
Anytime. You're always welcome.
Thank you. Cheers.
Yes, people, please do go out there, go and support Richard, go and show him what it's all about, okay? You've been locked into the Big Bad Station. And right now, we're going to take you to some new tunes. Keep it locked in. Here we go.
Hey, if I ever make it in a life, DJ Kat, you are royalty. So me have to set it thing alright. Hey, DJ